Don't think too much about nothing. Buddhist teaching. Human beings live in an endless cycle of thoughts. Our minds are restless, continuously generating ideas, fears, desires, and judgments. For centuries, Buddhist teachings have emphasized the danger of overthinking and the liberation that comes when the mind learns to rest. To think too much about nothing, or to obsess over the emptiness of life, the meaning of circumstances, or the void itself, can become a prison. The Buddha pointed out that the mind is like a monkey, leaping from branch to branch, never satisfied with staying still. The practice of Buddhist wisdom is not about eliminating the mind, but about seeing through it and understanding its nature. The phrase, "don't think too much about nothing," captures a paradox. To think endlessly about nothingness is to fall into the same trap that overthinking about material things creates, the trap of illusion. In Buddhism, nothingness, or śūnyatā, emptiness, is not a nihilistic concept but a liberating one. It points to the fact that all things are empty of inherent existence, constantly changing and interconnected. Yet when we obsessively try to understand, dissect, or intellectualize this truth, we move away from the actual experience of freedom. This teaching invites us to embrace silence, presence, and awareness. It tells us that wisdom is not in spinning ideas endlessly, but in cultivating stillness. To grasp this, we must explore how overthinking manifests in our lives, how Buddhist practice addresses it, and how we can learn to live with a quiet mind that does not get trapped in nothing. What follows are 5 deep explorations into the meaning of this teaching, each long enough to immerse the listener in the philosophy, psychology, and spiritual practice of Buddhism, the nature of overthinking, and the Buddhist understanding of nothingness. Overthinking is one of the most pervasive psychological struggles of modern humanity. We replay past conversations in our heads, project possible scenarios of the future, and doubt every decision. The mind becomes a battlefield of what-ifs, maybes, and should-haves. In Buddhist terms, this is the samsaric mind, the ordinary mind that clings to desires, aversions, and delusions. Overthinking is not merely a habit, it is a symptom of attachment and ignorance. To think too much about nothing is to take this mental turbulence and direct it toward the most abstract and elusive concept, emptiness. For example, a person may begin to reflect on the meaning of life and conclude that nothing really matters, but instead of finding peace in this realization, they obsess. They start to feel despair. If everything is nothing, what is the point? If emptiness is real, then why live at all? In this way, what is meant to be a doorway to liberation becomes another cage. Buddhism teaches that nothingness is not the absence of meaning, but the absence of fixed essence. Everything arises and passes away according to causes and conditions. When you see a tree, you see not only a tree but also the sunlight, the soil, the rain, the seed, and the countless elements that allowed it to grow. The tree has no separate existence. It is empty of an independent self. This emptiness is not depressing. It is liberating. It means nothing is isolated, nothing is permanent, and nothing is unchanging. Yet, when the restless mind tries to intellectualize emptiness, it misses the point. It wants to grasp the ungraspable. Just as you cannot hold the wind in your hands, you cannot capture the truth of emptiness by thinking about it endlessly. The mind that obsesses over nothingness becomes anxious, caught in circular reasoning. If there is nothing, then what about me? If I do not exist inherently, then who is asking these questions? If everything is empty, then what is the meaning of love, loss, or joy? These questions are not wrong, but when pursued with attachment to rational answers, they become obstacles. The Buddha described this problem through the metaphor of a man shot with a poisoned arrow. Instead of removing the arrow immediately, the man demands to know who shot it, what the arrow is made of, what kind of poison it contains, and where the shooter came from. By the time he finishes thinking about all these questions, he is dead. In the same way, when we overthink emptiness, we miss the opportunity to simply experience freedom by letting go. The essence of the teaching, "Don't think too much about nothing," is to prevent this trap. The point is not to deny inquiry or reflection. Buddhism values deep contemplation, but to remind us that there is a limit to thought. Beyond that limit lies direct experience, which is the heart of meditation. When we sit in meditation, we do not chase every thought that arises. We observe it, acknowledge it, and let it dissolve. Thoughts about nothingness are treated the same way as thoughts about success, failure, or relationships. They are phenomena passing through consciousness. To cling to them is to suffer. To release them is to taste peace. Moreover, the overthinking mind tends to turn nothingness into a negative. People may confuse emptiness with nihilism, believing it means that life has no value. But Buddhism insists that emptiness is inseparable from compassion. Because nothing has a fixed essence, everything is interdependent. This interdependence is the basis of empathy and kindness. If you and I are not separate in essence, then your suffering is not separate from mine. Emptiness reveals the unity of life, not its meaninglessness. Overthinking nothingness blinds us to this truth. It creates despair instead of compassion, paralysis instead of freedom. Therefore, the Buddhist path trains us to step beyond the obsessive mind. The practice of mindfulness, the Eightfold Path, and meditation are ways to calm the mind so that emptiness is experienced not as an abstract puzzle, but as a living reality. Imagine sitting by a river. If you obsess about where each drop of water comes from, how fast it flows, or when it will reach the sea, you miss the beauty of the river itself. But if you simply sit, breathe, and let the river flow, you experience peace. Similarly, when we stop overthinking nothingness, we discover the stillness of being. To live this way does not mean we abandon thought. It means we use thought wisely and let it rest when it becomes excessive. Thought is a tool, not a master. The Buddha never taught that we should not think, but he taught that we should not be enslaved by thought. To think too much about nothing is a form of slavery because it traps the mind in an endless cycle of confusion. This first exploration reveals the danger of obsession with nothingness. It shows us that emptiness is a truth to be lived, not an idea to be endlessly analyzed. The next step is to learn how to train the mind to stop its restless activity. And that is where Buddhist practice offers guidance. Before continuing, remember this: wisdom becomes alive when practiced. If you are finding value in this journey into Buddhist teachings, I invite you to support this channel by subscribing. Your subscription not only encourages the creation of more content, but also helps spread wisdom to others who may need it. Take a moment to subscribe now and continue walking this path of understanding with us. The second stage in exploring the teaching, "Don't think too much about nothing," is to recognize how the mind can be trained to rest. It is not enough to understand that overthinking about emptiness is dangerous. One must cultivate practices that calm the mind and bring it into alignment with awareness. In Buddhism, the problem of overthinking is addressed through mindfulness, meditation, ethical living, and the cultivation of wisdom. To fully understand this, we need to immerse ourselves in the psychology of the restless mind and the practical techniques offered by the Dharma to bring it back to stillness. Overthinking, when examined deeply, reveals a particular pattern. The human mind clings to thoughts because it believes they provide control. We imagine that if we can think long enough about a problem, a fear, or a concept, we will reach safety. But in truth, this compulsive thinking is rooted in insecurity. We do not feel safe in the present moment, so we flee into mental chatter. In this sense, overthinking is not a sign of intelligence, but a sign of fear. The more we think, the less present we are. This applies not only to daily worries, but also to philosophical questions about the meaning of life or the reality of emptiness. A person might sit and contemplate the void for hours, only to feel more confused and more anxious. The mind thinks it is working toward clarity, but it is only tying itself in knots. Buddhism recognizes this and points toward a radical solution. Stop identifying with thoughts. The mind produces thoughts just as the body produces sweat. To treat every thought as absolute truth is to become a prisoner of a natural function. Mindfulness, sati, trains us to notice thoughts without clinging to them. When a thought about nothingness arises, perhaps everything is meaningless, perhaps I don't exist, perhaps life is empty. The practice is to see it as just another formation, not as reality. The more you observe thoughts with detachment, the more they lose their power. Overthinking dissolves when we realize that thoughts are not chains, but clouds passing in the sky. Meditation is the laboratory where this realization becomes concrete. Sitting in silence, the meditator observes the breath, the sensations of the body, and the activity of the mind. At first, the thoughts seem overwhelming. One thought leads to another, and the mind races in 10 directions. But with patience, the meditator begins to see the impermanent nature of these thoughts. They arise, stay for a moment, and disappear. Even the thought, "nothing matters," arises and dissolves. Emptiness itself can be observed as a thought. When this becomes clear, the practitioner no longer fears thoughts, nor clings to them. They are like ripples on water. This training requires discipline. The Buddha taught that the Eightfold Path is the foundation for freeing the mind. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration are not abstract ideals, but practical instructions. Each element of the path works against the habit of overthinking. Right view reminds us that reality is impermanent and interdependent, so clinging to fixed ideas is futile. Right intention encourages us to let go of harmful obsessions and cultivate clarity. Right speech and right action discipline, the external expressions of the restless mind. Right livelihood ensures that we are not feeding inner turbulence through unwholesome means of survival. Right effort strengthens our determination to redirect the mind when it wanders. Right mindfulness keeps us anchored in the present, and right concentration develops the ability to rest the mind in meditation without being scattered. All of these combine to form an antidote to overthinking. But perhaps the most essential lesson is that liberation does not come from adding more thoughts, but from subtraction. The ordinary mind believes that by piling thought upon thought, it will finally reach truth. The Buddhist mind understands that truth is revealed when thoughts settle, like muddy water that becomes clear when undisturbed. Overthinking about nothing is like stirring the water endlessly, hoping that the turbulence will eventually reveal clarity. But the more you stir, the murkier it becomes. Only when you stop does the truth reveal itself. This is why Buddhist teachers emphasize direct experience over intellectual analysis. A student once asked a Zen master about the nature of emptiness. Instead of answering with philosophy, the master pointed to the sound of a bird outside. "That," he said, "is emptiness." The lesson is simple. Emptiness is not an abstract puzzle, but the living reality of interdependence and impermanence. To think too much about it is to miss the direct experience. The bird sings, the wind blows, the heart beats, and this is emptiness manifesting as life. However, the modern mind is not easily satisfied with such simplicity. Conditioned by education systems that reward analysis and a culture that values productivity, people often resist silence. They feel uncomfortable when the mind is not busy. The moment they sit still, they reach for their phones, turn on music, or seek distraction. This addiction to mental stimulation feeds overthinking. Even when reflecting on Buddhist teachings, the modern seeker may fall into the trap of intellectualizing. They read countless books, analyze every word of the sutras, and debate interpretations, yet never taste the stillness the Buddha pointed to. This is like staring at a menu and never eating the meal. To break this cycle, one must embrace simplicity. The practice of mindful breathing, for example, is a doorway out of overthinking. By simply observing the breath entering and leaving the body, the mind begins to settle. Each inhalation and exhalation is an anchor in the present. Thoughts still arise, but they lose their grip. The meditator learns that there is no need to fight or suppress thoughts. It is enough not to feed them. Overthinking about nothing dissolves when we return to the simplicity of the present moment. Another essential practice is compassion. Overthinking often arises from self-centeredness, from the constant I, me, mine. When you shift attention toward the well-being of others, the obsessive loops of your own mind lose importance. Emptiness is revealed not as a void, but as a field of connection. This is why the Buddha paired wisdom with compassion. To see emptiness is to see that we are not separate, and to act from this insight is compassion. Thinking too much about nothing isolates us in despair, but practicing compassion reconnects us to life. We must also recognize that overthinking about nothing can mask deeper emotional wounds. Sometimes people obsess about emptiness because they are avoiding grief, fear, or loneliness. It is easier to spiral into abstract questions than to face raw emotions. Buddhism invites us to turn toward our suffering with courage. Meditation is not an escape, but a confrontation with reality. By sitting with our pain, we learn that even suffering is empty, impermanent, dependent on causes and conditions, and not the whole of who we are. When this is seen, the need to overthink dissolves naturally. Stillness does not mean indifference. A quiet mind is not a numb mind. On the contrary, when thoughts settle, awareness becomes sharper. You hear the song of the bird more clearly, feel the warmth of the sun more deeply, and respond to life more wisely. Overthinking dulls awareness because the mind is lost in abstractions. Silence heightens awareness because it removes the veil of endless chatter. This is the paradox. When you stop thinking too much about nothing, you actually begin to experience everything more fully. It is worth mentioning that this teaching aligns with modern psychology as well. Cognitive science has shown that overthinking, also called rumination, is linked to anxiety, depression, and stress. The more people dwell on problems or abstract fears, the more trapped they become in negative emotions. Mindfulness-based therapies, inspired by Buddhism, have been shown to reduce rumination and increase well-being. The ancient wisdom of "don't think too much about nothing" is confirmed by contemporary science. Peace of mind comes not from analyzing endlessly, but from cultivating presence. The challenge, however, is that the ego resists letting go. The ego thrives on identification with thought. It wants to be certain, to have answers, to feel in control. Letting go of overthinking feels like death to the ego because it no longer dominates. But from the perspective of the Dharma, this death is liberation. The self that is obsessed with nothingness dissolves, revealing a deeper self that is spacious and free. This is not the annihilation of existence, but the discovery of true being. To walk this path requires trust. Trust in the teachings, trust in the practice, and trust in the possibility of liberation. Overthinking about nothing is a form of mistrust. It is the refusal to let go and rest in awareness. By practicing trust, by returning again and again to the breath, to mindfulness, to compassion, we gradually train the mind to release its compulsive grip. Eventually, the thought, "What if nothing matters?" loses its sting. It becomes just another passing cloud. This transformation is not instant. It is a lifelong journey, but every moment of awareness is a victory. Every breath taken in mindfulness is a step out of overthinking. Every act of compassion is a reminder that emptiness is not a void, but a web of connection. To live this way is to embody the teaching, not just think about it. Therefore, the true meaning of "don't think too much about nothing" is an invitation to live beyond the tyranny of thoughts. It is a call to silence, presence, and compassion. It is a reminder that wisdom is not found in endless speculation, but in direct experience. And it is a challenge to the restless mind. Can you stop stirring the water long enough to let it become clear? As you continue to explore these teachings with me, I encourage you to pause for a moment and support this journey by subscribing to the channel. By subscribing, you not only gain access to more reflections on Buddhist wisdom, but also help share these insights with others who may be struggling with the same restless mind. If you value this exploration and wish to see more, please take a moment now to subscribe and join this community of seekers walking the path together. When we move deeper into the exploration of the teaching, don't think too much about nothing. The third dimension that arises is the relationship between thought, reality, and liberation. While the first stage reveals the danger of obsessing about emptiness, and the second stage shows us the practices that calm the restless mind, the third stage brings us to the transformative realization that life itself is not meant to be endlessly dissected, but directly lived. The Buddhist tradition, across its many schools and centuries of refinement, has always returned to this core insight. The truth is not hidden in intellectual analysis, but in awareness that transcends thought. To spend one's life entangled in overthinking about nothingness is to miss the living heartbeat of the present. The mind, however, resists this truth. It believes that more thought equals more clarity. This is the delusion of the intellect. The intellect is an extraordinary tool for navigating the world, for creating language, art, science, and society. But it is not the tool for awakening. Thought is linear, dualistic, and bound by language. Awakening is non-linear, non-dual, and beyond words. When the mind tries to reach enlightenment through thought, it is like a person trying to touch the sky by climbing a ladder that never ends. Every step leads to another step, and the sky remains out of reach. Overthinking about nothingness is this endless ladder. The Buddhist masters often warned against this trap. In Zen, a famous saying declares, "Painted rice cakes do not satisfy hunger. Intellectual understanding of emptiness is like a painted rice cake. It may look beautiful, but it does not nourish. Only the direct experience of emptiness in meditation satisfies the hunger of the soul." This is why the Buddha did not answer many metaphysical questions posed to him. When asked whether the universe is eternal or not, finite or infinite, whether the soul exists after death or not, he remained silent. Why? Because he knew that such questions lead to speculation without end, distracting the seeker from the urgent task of ending suffering. Overthinking about nothing is like debating how many stars can fit into the sky while ignoring the suffering of the world before us. But how does one step out of this trap? By seeing through the illusion of permanence and selfhood, Buddhism teaches that all phenomena are marked by three characteristics: impermanence, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. Overthinking about nothing ignores these truths. It assumes that thoughts themselves carry solidity, that by analyzing enough, we can arrive at certainty. But thoughts are impermanent. They arise and dissolve like bubbles in a stream. They are empty of inherent self. When we cling to them as if they will bring lasting certainty, we suffer. The realization of non-self is particularly important here. The one who is overthinking about nothing assumes that there is a fixed I doing the thinking. But Buddhism reveals that this I is itself a construction of thoughts, sensations, and perceptions. When you observe the mind carefully, you see that there is no permanent thinker behind the thoughts, only thoughts arising. To think too much about nothing is therefore a double illusion. Clinging to thoughts about emptiness while clinging to the illusion of a thinker who is supposedly in control of those thoughts. Meditation exposes this illusion. In deep meditation, the sense of self begins to dissolve. Thoughts arise without an owner, like sounds in the distance. Sensations come and go, but there is no permanent self behind them. This experience is not frightening when approached with mindfulness. It is liberating. It reveals that what we feared as nothing is actually freedom. There is no permanent self to defend, no permanent reality to cling to, and therefore no ultimate ground for suffering. Emptiness becomes not a concept to overthink, but the lived truth of existence. Yet the path to this realization is gradual. The ordinary mind clings desperately to identity and control. This is why overthinking about nothing can sometimes spiral into despair. When people hear that life is empty, they interpret it as meaninglessness. They feel threatened by the absence of a fixed self. They believe that if there is no solid ground, there is no purpose. But Buddhism teaches the opposite. Emptiness is not the absence of meaning, but the possibility of infinite meaning. Because nothing is fixed, everything is possible. Because the self is not permanent, transformation is possible. Because life is empty of inherent essence, it is full of potential. Overthinking about nothing misses this liberating aspect and instead gets trapped in nihilism. The key difference between nihilism and Buddhist emptiness is compassion. Nihilism says, nothing matters, so why care? Emptiness says, nothing is separate, so everything is connected. The nihilistic mind overthinks itself into paralysis, while the Buddhist mind awakens into compassion. When you see that your suffering is not separate from the suffering of others, you naturally act with kindness. When you see that nothing has a fixed essence, you are freed from prejudice and judgment. Overthinking about nothing builds walls of despair. Awakening to emptiness opens doors of compassion. This shift from despair to compassion is the heart of the third stage. It cannot be reached by thought alone. It requires practice. Consider the practice of metta, or loving-kindness meditation. In this practice, the meditator silently repeats phrases such as, "May I be happy," "May you be happy," "May all beings be happy." At first, the mind resists. It wants to analyze, does this really work? What if people don't deserve happiness? Isn't everything empty anyway? These thoughts arise as obstacles, but if the meditator continues with sincerity, the practice bypasses intellectual doubt and plants seeds of compassion. Over time, the heart softens. The experience of connection becomes real. This is emptiness lived through compassion. Another example is found in the practice of zazen in Zen Buddhism. The practitioner sits in silence, without clinging to thoughts or trying to suppress them. When a thought about nothingness arises, maybe nothing exists, maybe life is meaningless, the instruction is simply to notice it and let it go. No analysis, no debate, just return to sitting. This practice gradually reveals the futility of overthinking and the peace of direct awareness. The student learns that freedom is not found in solving the puzzle of nothingness, but in dropping the need to solve it at all. There is also a profound teaching in the Heart Sutra, one of the most important texts in Mahayana Buddhism. It declares, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form." This paradox shows that emptiness is not separate from reality, but is reality itself. To overthink about emptiness as if it was something apart from daily life is to miss the point. Emptiness is the cup you drink from, the breath you take, the words you speak. To understand this intellectually is useful, but to live it is liberation. Overthinking about nothing keeps emptiness at a distance. Direct awareness brings it into every moment. Modern seekers often struggle with this teaching because it challenges the deep-rooted habit of identifying with thought. From childhood, we are trained to solve problems by thinking. Education, careers, and culture reward analysis. So when we approach spirituality, we unconsciously apply the same method: analyze, dissect, compare, debate. But the Dharma asks us to do something radically different, to let go. This feels uncomfortable at first, even threatening. But with patience, we discover that letting go is not losing, it is gaining freedom. The transformation can be illustrated by the story of a monk who came to his master with endless questions about emptiness. The master listened patiently, but finally poured tea into the monk's cup until it overflowed. The monk exclaimed, "Stop! The cup is full!" The master replied, "Just like this cup, your mind is full of thoughts. How can I show you emptiness unless you first empty your cup?" The story reveals that overthinking about nothing is like filling the cup with endless ideas. To experience emptiness, we must first empty the mind. The third stage, then, is not about rejecting thought entirely, but about transcending it. Thought becomes a servant, not a master. You use thought when necessary, for communication, for practical tasks, for reflection, but you no longer drown in it. When thoughts about nothingness arise, you see them for what they are, impermanent, empty, passing. You do not fight them, nor cling to them. You simply let them come and go, like waves on the ocean. In this way, emptiness becomes not an object of obsession, but the ground of freedom. To live in this state is to embody the middle way. The Buddha always warned against extremes, extreme indulgence and extreme asceticism, extreme belief and extreme doubt. Overthinking about nothing is an extreme. It is the extreme of intellectual doubt. The middle way is to acknowledge the thought, but not be enslaved by it. To recognize emptiness, but not despair over it. To live compassionately, in the awareness of interdependence. This balance is the essence of Buddhist wisdom. Ultimately, the invitation of this teaching is to live fully. When you stop overthinking about nothing, you free yourself to experience life directly. The sound of the rain, the taste of tea, the smile of a friend, all become doorways into awakening. Emptiness is not elsewhere, not in some philosophical puzzle, but right here in the present. To think too much about it is to miss it. To live it is to awaken. If these reflections resonate with you, I invite you to continue supporting this journey by subscribing to the channel. Each subscription helps keep these teachings alive and spreads them to others who may be lost in overthinking and seeking peace. By subscribing, you join a community dedicated to walking this path together. Take a moment now to subscribe, and let us continue exploring the depths of Buddhist wisdom side by side. As we continue to unfold the depth of the teaching, don't think too much about nothing. We enter a fourth dimension that speaks not only to the inner experience of the mind, but also to how this teaching can be lived in the midst of daily life. Up to this point, we have seen the danger of obsessing about emptiness, the ways to train the mind to rest, and the transformative shift from nihilism to compassion. Now we must see how this insight takes form in the living world, in the way we work, love, suffer, and walk through ordinary days. For Buddhism does not exist merely in meditation halls or ancient sutras. It is a living path meant to be integrated into every moment. The instruction not to think too much about nothing is not just for monks or philosophers, but for every human being caught in the storm of thought. Daily life is full of opportunities to practice this teaching. Consider how the average person spends their day. From the moment they wake up, the mind begins to race, planning tasks, replaying past conversations, worrying about the future, comparing themselves to others. Beneath it all is a subtle sense of unease, as if thinking more will solve the underlying fear. And yet, the more they think, the more exhausted they become. At night, they collapse into bed, mind still buzzing, wondering why peace feels so far away. This cycle repeats endlessly. Overthinking about nothing is not only about philosophical emptiness, but also about the trivialities that consume our minds, imaginary scenarios, judgments, regrets, and fantasies that lead nowhere. Buddhism recognizes that the restless mind will not be healed by suppression or force. Telling yourself to stop thinking only adds more thinking. Instead, the practice is one of awareness. When a thought arises, you notice it. If you catch yourself replaying an argument from yesterday, you acknowledge, this is anger resurfacing. If you find yourself worrying about tomorrow's meeting, you see, this is anxiety projecting into the future. If you drift into pondering whether life has meaning or whether you are nothing, you label it gently as speculation. Each time, you return to the present. In doing so, you weaken the grip of compulsive thought. This discipline extends into relationships. Much of human suffering in relationships comes from overthinking, interpreting the words of others, doubting intentions, replaying conversations, fearing rejection. How many friendships and loves have been poisoned not by actual harm, but by imagined harm constructed in the mind? Overthinking about nothing can turn silence into offense, absence into abandonment, indifference into hatred. The Buddhist response is to cultivate presence and compassion instead of speculation. When you speak to another person with full presence, you are not trapped in what you think they mean, but in what is actually being shared. When you listen deeply, you hear not only words, but the heart behind them. Overthinking about nothing creates walls. Awareness creates bridges. This teaching also reshapes our relationship with work and ambition. Modern society glorifies productivity, achievement, and constant striving. People spend their days consumed by thoughts of success and failure, comparing themselves to others, worrying about whether they are enough. Beneath this lies the same pattern, overthinking about nothing. The Buddha warned against this in the teaching of the second arrow. The first arrow is inevitable suffering, the challenges of life. The second arrow is the suffering we add through our own thoughts. A failed project is the first arrow. The endless thoughts of I am worthless, I will never succeed, others are better than me, are the second. By practicing mindfulness, we learn not to shoot ourselves with the second arrow. We face challenges without drowning in the ocean of unnecessary thoughts. Overthinking about nothing is also closely tied to our fear of death. Many people, when confronted with mortality, spiral into obsessive thoughts. What happens after I die? Do I disappear into nothing? Is there heaven or hell? Will I be remembered? These are natural questions, but when clung to obsessively, they lead to despair. The Buddha did not encourage endless speculation about the afterlife, but directed attention to the present moment. Death is certain, but the fear of nothingness is an illusion. What matters is how we live now, how we awaken now. When we stop overthinking death, we can live more fully. Every breath becomes precious, every act infused with meaning. To live this teaching in daily life requires the cultivation of simplicity. The Buddha often praised the virtue of simplicity, living with few possessions, eating mindfully, walking with awareness, speaking truthfully. Simplicity is not poverty, it is clarity. It means we do not complicate life with unnecessary thoughts, desires, and illusions. To think too much about nothing is to complicate life. To embrace simplicity is to discover peace. Imagine drinking a cup of tea with full attention. You feel the warmth in your hands, the aroma rising, the taste on your tongue. In that moment, there is no overthinking, no emptiness to obsess about, only direct experience. That is the essence of Buddhist living. One of the profound insights of Buddhism is that the mind is not inherently restless. Restlessness is a habit, not a nature. Just as a pond becomes clear when left undisturbed, the mind becomes clear when we stop feeding it with compulsive thought. This is why silence is so powerful. In silence, we discover that life does not collapse without thought. The sun still rises, the breath still flows, the heart still beats. Silence reveals that awareness exists prior to thought. Overthinking about nothing hides this truth. Silence reveals it. But silence does not mean withdrawal from the world. A person who lives this teaching fully still participates in life, works, loves, creates, helps others. The difference is that they act from awareness, not compulsion. They are not driven by overthinking, but guided by clarity. In this sense, not thinking too much about nothing is not passivity. It is the foundation for wise action. When the mind is not clouded by obsessive thoughts, decisions are clearer, relationships are kinder, and life flows with harmony. There is a story of a farmer who worried constantly about his crops. Every night he lay awake, imagining droughts, floods, pests, and failures. His mind was consumed by fear. Another farmer, equally devoted to his land, tended to his crops during the day and slept peacefully at night. When asked why he did not worry, he replied, "Worrying does not bring rain or sunshine. My work is to care for the field today, not to control tomorrow." This is the spirit of the teaching, to live fully in the present without overthinking about what cannot be controlled. In modern life, this lesson is perhaps more urgent than ever. Technology bombards us with information, opinions, and distractions. Social media amplifies comparison. News cycles fuel anxiety, and constant connectivity leaves no room for silence. The result is a culture of overthinking, where people cannot rest even when nothing is wrong. The Buddhist teaching becomes a remedy. Disconnect, breathe, return to presence. To stop thinking too much about nothing is a radical act of freedom in a world addicted to thought. Yet practicing this is not easy. The mind will resist, the ego will cling, the culture will push. This is why community is essential. In Buddhism, the Sangha, the community of practitioners, is one of the three jewels alongside the Buddha and the Dharma. Practicing with others strengthens resolve and reminds us that we are not alone. When you sit in meditation with others, when you share silence, when you walk mindfully in a group, the collective energy supports you. Overthinking thrives in isolation. Awareness blossoms in connection. Ultimately, the fourth dimension of this teaching is about integration. It's about bringing the wisdom of don't think too much about nothing into the marketplace, the home, the workplace, the school, the family. It is about embodying mindfulness in every breath, compassion in every action, and simplicity in every moment. This is not reserved for monks in monasteries, but for everyone who seeks peace. The teaching is not abstract but practical, not distant but immediate. It is a way of being that transforms the ordinary into the sacred. To live without overthinking about nothing is to rediscover the wonder of existence. It is to see the beauty of the sky without needing to explain it, to feel the touch of a hand without analyzing it, to walk through the world without the burden of endless speculation. It is to be free here and now. And as we continue this journey together, I invite you once again to support this path of wisdom by subscribing to the channel. Each subscription helps spread these teachings further, bringing light to those who may be trapped in the darkness of overthinking. By subscribing, you join a living community of seekers who walk the path of awareness together. Take this step now, subscribe, and continue with us as we explore the profound depths of Buddhist wisdom. The fifth and final exploration of the teaching, don't think too much about nothing, brings us to the most profound level of its meaning, where philosophy, practice, and daily living converge into realization. If the earlier stages showed us the danger of overthinking, the practices of calming the mind, the transformation of despair into compassion, and the integration into ordinary life, now we face the ultimate invitation, to awaken fully to the nature of reality and to live in freedom. For Buddhism is not only a set of teachings to comfort the restless mind, but a path that points to liberation. And liberation, in its essence, is the release from compulsive thought, the release from clinging, the release from the prison of overthinking about nothing. When the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he did not discover a complicated philosophy, but a simple, direct truth. All things arise and pass away. All are empty of inherent self, and suffering ends when clinging ends. This truth is so simple that the intellectual mind struggles to accept it. It wants more analysis, more explanation, more concepts. But enlightenment is not reached through complication. It is realized through simplicity. The Buddha himself described his awakening as seeing things as they really are, not as the mind imagines, not as the intellect overthinks, but as they are, impermanent, interconnected, empty. To not think too much about nothing is to align with this direct seeing. It means we stop spinning endless webs of speculation about life, death, and meaning, and instead awaken to the truth that is already here. The sound of the bird, the touch of the wind, the beating of the heart. These are expressions of emptiness, of interdependence, of life. The mind that overthinks misses them. The mind that rests in awareness sees them clearly. This is why the masters often emphasized ordinary experiences as gateways to awakening. A Zen master sweeping the floor, a monk drinking tea, a farmer working in the field. Each action, when done with full presence, reveals the truth of emptiness. There is no need to think too much about it. But what does it mean to live in this realization? It means to live without fear. Much of human overthinking arises from fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of death, fear of nothingness. The mind believes that if it thinks enough, it can protect itself from fear, but the opposite is true. The more we think, the more fear grows. Liberation comes not from thinking more, but from letting go. When we see that there is no permanent self to defend, fear dissolves. When we see that death is only the transformation of conditions, fear loses its grip. When we see that emptiness is not nihilism but interconnection, fear turns into compassion. This is the essence of awakening, the fearless heart that lives in harmony with emptiness. To reach this state requires deep practice. Meditation, mindfulness, ethical living and compassion are not just techniques, but doorways into awakening. Each time you sit in silence and let go of thoughts, you taste freedom. Each time you act with kindness, you embody emptiness. Each time you let go of clinging, you move closer to liberation. Overthinking about nothing is replaced by living in the fullness of the present. This is why Buddhist practice is often described as the pathless path. It is not about reaching somewhere else, but about awakening here and now. Yet, the ego resists this realization. It wants to exist, to control, to know. It fears emptiness, because emptiness means it is not as solid as it believes. This is why overthinking about nothing often becomes obsessive. It is the ego's attempt to hold on to itself by grasping at ideas of nothingness. But when we see through the illusion of the ego, we realize that emptiness is not annihilation, but freedom. The ego dissolves, but awareness remains. Life continues, not as a possession of the self, but as a flow of interdependent causes and conditions. This is the heart of Buddhist wisdom. To die to the false self is to awaken to the true nature of reality. The practice of letting go becomes central here. Letting go does not mean abandoning responsibility or rejecting life. It means releasing the compulsive grip of thought and clinging. We let go of the need to control the future, the need to replay the past, the need to find certainty in nothingness. We rest in awareness, in presence, in compassion. Letting go is not a one-time act, but a continuous practice, moment by moment. Each breath is an opportunity to let go. Each thought is an opportunity to release. Each encounter is an opportunity to awaken. This final stage also brings us face to face with the paradox of language. We are using words to describe a reality that transcends words. We are thinking about a teaching that says not to think too much. This paradox is not a flaw, but a pointer. The teachings are like fingers pointing at the moon. If we stare at the finger, we miss the moon. Overthinking about nothing is staring at the finger. Awakening is looking at the moon. The words of the Buddha, the sutras, the commentaries, all are fingers pointing. The realization itself is beyond them. It is lived, not thought. And yet, language has its role. It guides, inspires, directs. That is why we are here exploring this teaching together. But the true invitation is not to remain in words, but to move beyond them, to take what is useful and then let it go, to not cling even to the teaching itself. As the Buddha said, "My teachings are like a raft. They are to carry you across the river, not to be carried on your back after you have crossed." Overthinking about nothing is like clinging to the raft after reaching the shore. The teaching invites us to cross and then to live freely. In daily life, this realization transforms everything. Work becomes not a burden, but an expression of presence. Relationships become not arenas of fear, but expressions of compassion. Suffering becomes not a curse, but an opportunity to awaken. Even death becomes not an enemy, but a natural part of the flow of life. To live this way is to live liberated, free from the chains of compulsive thought. It is to embody the teaching fully, not in theory, but in practice. The beauty of this realization is that it is available to everyone. You do not need to be a monk, a scholar, or a saint. You only need to practice awareness, compassion, and letting go. The teaching, "Don't think too much about nothing," is not distant or abstract. It is immediate. It is the invitation to stop overthinking right now and to live in the present. It is the reminder that peace is not in speculation, but in silence. It is the call to awaken to the truth that is already here. As we close this exploration, let us remember that the path is not about reaching some faraway goal, but about living each moment with awareness. Overthinking about nothing is a habit that can be broken. Awareness is a capacity that can be cultivated. Compassion is a seed that can be nourished. Liberation is a reality that can be lived. The Buddha's teaching is not a philosophy to be debated endlessly, but a way of life to be practiced. And so I invite you, as we bring this reflection to completion, to take one more step. Support this journey by subscribing to the channel. By subscribing, you join a community dedicated to walking the path of awareness together. You help spread these teachings to others who may be trapped in the prison of overthinking, longing for peace. Your support keeps the wisdom alive and flowing. Take this moment now, subscribe, and continue with us as we walk the timeless path of awakening.